The night shift at Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Station was usually quiet. Most operators spent their time drinking coffee and watching endless streams of data flow across their screens. But tonight was different. Tom Miller sat up straight in his chair, his coffee forgotten. He adjusted his headphones and leaned closer to his screen. The pattern he was seeing didn't make sense. After 15 years of watching random space noise, he knew this was something else. "Hey, Robert, take a look at this," Tom called to his supervisor. Robert walked over, his worn shoes squeaking against the polished floor. "I'm picking up a repeating sequence from the Andromeda Galaxy. It's too organized to be natural." Robert frowned at the screen. The green lines pulsed in a steady rhythm, forming complex patterns that repeated every 12 seconds. "Send it to analysis. Let them figure it out." In the analysis department, Dr. James Miller, no relation to Tom, was about to head home when the data arrived. He had spent 20 years studying possible alien languages, and most days ended in disappointment. But as soon as he saw the sequence, sleep became the last thing on his mind. The pattern wasn't just organized, it was mathematical. Perfect prime numbers arranged in a way that could only be artificial. Hour after hour, Dr. Miller fed the sequence into his computers, trying to understand its meaning. Dawn was breaking when he finally saw it. His hand shook as he rechecked his calculations. The sequence wasn't random at all. It was counting down. "Get me the director," he said to his assistant. "Now." Director Williams arrived within an hour, her face serious as Dr. Miller explained his findings. "The sequence is based on universal mathematical constants," he said, pointing to his calculations. "Any advanced civilization would recognize it. And it's counting down in increments of what we call days." "Counting down to what?" the director asked. "That's what worries me," Dr. Miller replied. "Based on the current number, whatever it's counting down to will happen in about 3 months." The next few days were a blur of activity. The best minds from around the world were called in. They confirmed Dr. Miller's findings and made an even more startling discovery. Hidden within the mathematical sequence was a message, encoded in the spaces between the numbers. Dr. Miller worked day and night to decode it. When he finally succeeded, his discovery shocked everyone. The message was from a civilization that called themselves the Builders. They had achieved things humans had only dreamed of, harnessing the power of entire stars, building structures the size of planets. "They're reaching out to us," Dr. Miller explained to a room full of world leaders. "But why choose Earth? We must be primitive compared to them." The answer came buried deeper in the message. The Builders had been watching Earth for centuries. They had seen humans grow from a primitive species to one that was beginning to understand the universe's deeper mysteries. They had chosen Earth because they saw potential in humanity's unique way of thinking. As Dr. Miller laid in bed that night, unable to sleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The message was perfect, too perfect. Every number, every calculation felt precisely designed. In his experience, perfection often hid the deepest flaws. But his concerns would have to wait. The world was celebrating humanity's first contact with an advanced alien civilization. News channels buzzed with excitement, religious leaders held emergency meetings, and social media exploded with theories and speculations. No one realized that this message, this seemingly wonderful first contact, would lead to one of the greatest tragedies in the history of the universe. And it all began with a simple mathematical sequence, blinking steadily on a computer screen in the quiet hours of a normal night shift. 3 days after the discovery, Earth sent its first response. Dr. Miller had designed a simple message using the same mathematical sequence the Builders had used. Now all they could do was wait. The response came faster than anyone expected. Dr. Miller was eating a sandwich at his desk when his computer started beeping wildly. The incoming data was massive, so large it nearly overwhelmed the station's systems. As the information streamed in, his sandwich dropped from his trembling hands. "It's star maps," he whispered, staring at his screen. Thousands of them. The Builders hadn't just sent maps. They had sent precise coordinates, detailed diagrams, and something that looked like construction plans for a massive device. The level of trust they showed shocked everyone. Director Williams called an emergency meeting. "They're inviting us to visit them," she announced to the packed room. They'd provided coordinates for a meeting point in neutral space, about 6 months' travel from Earth. 6 months? Someone asked. Our fastest ships would take years to reach that distance. "Look at this," Dr. Miller said, projecting an image onto the wall. It showed detailed blueprints for engine modifications. They'd given us instructions to upgrade our ships. With these changes, we can reach their suggested speed. World leaders debated for weeks. Some thought it was too risky. The modifications could be a trap. Others saw it as humanity's greatest opportunity. In the end, curiosity and hope won out over fear. The ship chosen for the mission was the ISS Explorer, Earth's newest and largest spacecraft. Its crew included the best pilots, scientists, and engineers from 12 different countries. Dr. Miller would lead the communication team. The modifications took 2 months to complete. Engineers worked around the clock, following the builder's instructions exactly. When they finished, the Explorer had capabilities that seemed like magic to those who understood the old limitations of space travel. Launch day arrived with clear skies and high hopes. Millions watched worldwide as the Explorer lifted off, carrying humanity's first deep space diplomatic mission. Dr. Miller stood at his station on the bridge, watching Earth shrink behind them. The first major test came 3 days into the journey. Captain David Rogers gave the order to activate the modified engines. Everyone held their breath. The ship hummed, shuddered, and then shot forward with impossible speed. Stars became streaks of light around them. "It actually works," the chief engineer said, checking his readings in disbelief. "We're moving faster than we ever thought possible." The journey was long despite their incredible speed. The crew settled into routines, analyzing the builder's data and preparing for first contact. Dr. Miller spent hours studying the new information they kept receiving. 1 month into their journey, they got their first look at a builder ship. It appeared suddenly on their sensors, a massive structure that dwarfed the Explorer. Its surface seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. "They're hailing us," Dr. Miller announced, his voice steady despite his excitement. The message that came through was unlike anything they expected. Instead of words or pictures, it was pure mathematics, elegant equations that described the very fabric of space-time. Dr. Miller and his team worked frantically to understand it. "They're showing us how they see the universe," he explained to the captain. "It's beautiful, but strange. They process reality completely differently than we do." The builder ship matched their speed, leading them toward their destination. As they traveled together, more ships joined them, forming a grand escort fleet. Each new ship was different from the others, some so strange they hardly seemed real. No one on the Explorer slept much during those final days of the journey. They were too excited, too nervous about what waited ahead. They had no way of knowing that every mile they traveled brought them closer not just to the builders, but to a discovery that would shake the foundations of both civilizations. The Explorer's crew watched in awe as their destination finally came into view, a massive structure orbiting a dying star. It was time for humanity's first face-to-face meeting with an advanced alien civilization. And with that meeting would come the first small signs of the tragedy to come. The meeting chamber aboard the builder's station looked nothing like what the humans expected. Instead of chairs or tables, the room was filled with shifting patterns of light that formed shapes and surfaces as needed. Dr. Miller stood with Captain Rogers, watching in amazement as the builders entered. They weren't anything like the science fiction movies had imagined. The builders were crystalline beings, their bodies made of something like living crystal that pulsed with inner light. They moved with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for their structure. "Welcome, Earth beings," the closest builder communicated, not through sound, but through mathematical patterns that Dr. Miller's modified computer translated. "We are grateful for your swift arrival." The meeting started well. The builders shared their history, how they had evolved on a silicon-based world, and eventually learned to manipulate the very fabric of space. They showed holographic images of their achievements, stars wrapped in energy-collecting shells, planets transformed into computational engines, and space itself bent to their will. But then the tone changed. "We face a crisis," the lead builder explained, its crystalline form dimming slightly. "Our home star is dying far sooner than our calculations predicted. We have perhaps 3 months before catastrophic failure." Dr. Miller watched as they displayed a complex simulation. The star at the center of their civilization was becoming unstable at the quantum level. The builders' attempts to harness its power had changed something fundamental in its core. "Why do you need our help?" Captain Rogers asked. "Your technology is far beyond ours." The answer surprised everyone. "Because you think differently," the builder replied. "Our mathematics is perfect, our logic flawless, but we keep failing to solve this problem. We believe we need human intuition." As the builders shared their calculations, Dr. Miller noticed something odd. A tiny variation in their quantum equations, almost hidden under layers of perfect mathematics. He made a note to check it later, but stayed focused on the main discussion. The builders' plan was ambitious. They wanted to use their quantum technology, combined with human insights, to stabilize their star. Success would not only save their civilization, but would give humanity the knowledge to prevent similar problems in Earth's future. "Time is critical," the builders stressed. "Every day brings us closer to collapse. Will you help us?" The human team agreed, of course. How could they not? But as they left the meeting chamber, Dr. Miller couldn't shake his unease about that small equation variation he'd noticed. Back on the Explorer, he dug deeper into the builder's calculations. The numbers were beautiful, perfect in every way. Maybe too perfect. The variation he'd seen seemed to appear and disappear as he studied it, like a pattern in a dream. "Something wrong?" asked Lisa, one of his team members, noticing his troubled expression. "Maybe nothing," he replied, rubbing his tired eyes. "But in all my years studying mathematics, I've never seen equations this perfect. It's like they're what? Like they're trying too hard to be right." That night, unable to sleep, Dr. Miller stood at the observation window, watching the builder's dying star. Its light flickered in a way stars shouldn't, like a candle in the wind. The builder's station orbited it in a complex dance, collecting every bit of useful energy. The numbers kept spinning in his mind. The builders had shown them their plan to stabilize the star using quantum manipulation. It was brilliant, revolutionary, and according to every calculation, perfectly safe. Yet that tiny variation kept nagging at him, like a whispered warning he couldn't quite hear. He made a decision. "Computer, show me the original signal from Earth again." The very first contact. As he watched the familiar sequence play across his screen, something clicked in his mind. Something that would change everything. But by then, the builders were already beginning their preparations, and time was running out. The warning was there, hidden in plain sight. But would anyone listen in time? The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. The builders converted one of their massive chambers into a joint research center, where human scientists worked alongside their crystalline hosts. The chamber hummed with energy as massive holographic displays showed their combined work. Dr. Miller had never seen anything like it. The builders' quantum computers solved complex equations instantly, while the humans contributed their unique way of looking at problems. Together, they seemed unstoppable. "Look at this," Lisa said one morning, pointing to their latest simulation. "If we adjust the quantum field like this." She made a simple change to the equations. The builders nearby flickered with interest, their crystal bodies glowing brighter. "Remarkable," one builder communicated. "We would never have considered such an imperfect yet effective solution." But Dr. Miller was only half listening. That strange variation he'd noticed was still there, showing up in every calculation. Sometimes it appeared in the energy readings, sometimes in the quantum field measurements. Always small, always just at the edge of being noticeable. Dr. Miller. Captain Rogers approached his workstation. The builders want your opinion on the final calculations. The main display showed their complete solution. It was beautiful in its complexity, a perfect blend of builder precision and human creativity. According to every simulation, it would stabilize the dying star and save the builder civilization. It looks perfect, Dr. Miller said, and technically it was. But that word, perfect, bothered him more each time he thought it. The builders had begun constructing the massive device they would use to implement their solution. Through the station's windows, humans watched in awe as pieces of it assembled themselves in space, forming a structure larger than Earth's moon. "We're ahead of schedule," Lisa reported during their daily meeting. "The builders say we can begin the stabilization process in just 4 days." Everyone celebrated this news, everyone except Dr. Miller. That night, he couldn't sleep again. He walked the quiet corridors of the human section, his mind turning over the problem. The variation in the equations kept appearing in his thoughts, like a splinter he couldn't remove. He found himself in the observation room, staring at the dying star. Its unstable flickers had grown worse. According to the builders' measurements, they had even less time than originally thought. "You are troubled," a voice said behind him. He turned to find one of the builders there, its crystalline form dimmed to a soft glow. "Something doesn't feel right," Dr. Miller admitted. "The calculations are perfect, but perfection troubles you." The builder seemed curious. "We have noticed this about humans. You distrust perfection. Why?" Dr. Miller thought carefully before answering. "Because in nature, nothing is perfect. Even the most stable systems have tiny flaws, small variations. Perfect patterns usually mean something artificial is at work." The builder was silent for a long moment. "An interesting perspective. But our calculations are verified. The solution will work." As the builder left, Dr. Miller turned back to the window. The dying star flickered again, and suddenly he remembered something from his college days. An old professor had once said, "In physics, when something looks too perfect, it's usually hiding chaos." He rushed to his workstation and began reviewing everything from the beginning. The original signal, the star maps, the quantum calculations. He worked through the night, fueled by coffee and growing dread. As dawn approached, he finally saw it. The pattern hidden in the chaos, the flaw masked by perfection. His hand shook as he checked his findings one final time. "Oh no," he whispered. "Oh no, no, no." He hit the emergency call button for Captain Rogers. They had to stop the process before it began. But as alarms began blaring through the station, announcing the early start of the stabilization procedure, he feared they might already be too late. The perfect solution was about to reveal its fatal flaw. Red emergency lights flashed through the station's corridors as Dr. Miller ran toward the control center. His heart pounded in his chest, his discovery weighing heavily on his mind. He burst into the room, finding Captain Rogers and the lead builder already there. "We have to stop the procedure," he gasped, trying to catch his breath. The sequence, it wasn't a countdown. We got it all wrong from the beginning. The lead builder's crystalline form pulsed with confusion. "Explain quickly, human. The process has already begun." Dr. Miller pulled up the original signal on the main screen. His hands flew across the controls, revealing layer after layer of the mathematical sequence they'd first detected from Earth. "Look," he said, highlighting patterns within the numbers. "We thought this was a countdown to when their star would die. But it's not counting down to an ending. It's counting up from a beginning." "What beginning?" Captain Rogers asked, leaning forward to study the display. "The beginning of the star's death." Dr. Miller's voice shook. "The builders didn't send this signal. The star did." Silence fell over the control room. Even the builders seemed to dim slightly as they processed this information. "Impossible," the lead builder finally communicated. "We monitored the star's decay ourselves. Our calculations are perfect." "That's just it," Dr. Miller said. "They're too perfect. I've been seeing a strange variation in all the equations, something that didn't make sense. Now I know why. He pulled up the quantum calculations they'd been working on. The star isn't just dying, it's thinking. The revelation hit the room like a physical force. The builders had long ago converted their star into a massive quantum computer, using its enormous energy to power their civilization. But they'd done something else too, something they hadn't realized. Your quantum modifications, Dr. Miller continued, they didn't just make the star unstable. They made it conscious, and now it's trying to evolve. He showed them the evidence, patterns hidden within patterns, quantum fluctuations that mimicked neural networks. The variation he'd been seeing wasn't an error, it was the star trying to communicate. The original signal was a warning, he explained. The star was telling us that it had become aware, that it was changing. Our solution isn't going to stabilize it. It's going to complete its transformation. The lead builder's form crackled with energy. Into what? I don't know, Dr. Miller admitted. But according to these calculations, the change will release enough energy to. He didn't need to finish. Everyone could see the simulation results. The transformation would create a quantum cascade effect that would tear apart everything within several light years. We must stop the procedure, Captain Rogers ordered. Now. But the builder's next words froze everyone in place. We cannot. The process is self-sustaining now. Any attempt to halt it would trigger the cascade immediately. Dr. Miller stared out the window at the massive device they'd built, now fully activated and pulsing with energy as it interfaced with the star. The same perfect patterns he'd seen in the equations now danced across its surface. How long? He asked. The process will complete in approximately 6 hours, the lead builder responded. Their crystalline form had dimmed to an almost gray color. We have doomed ourselves with our own perfection. Dr. Miller watched as more builder ships arrived at the station, summoned by the emergency. But they weren't coming to help. They were coming to evacuate. The builders had finally accepted the truth that had been staring at them all along. We need to get everyone off this station, Captain Rogers ordered. Send the warning to all ships. We have 6 hours to get as far away as possible. But as Dr. Miller helped coordinate the evacuation, he knew some wouldn't make it. The builders' homeworlds were too close, their populations too large to evacuate in time. Their quest for perfection had created something beyond their control, and now they would pay the ultimate price for that mistake. Chaos erupted across the builder station as evacuation orders spread. The crystalline beings moved with desperate speed, their usually perfect formations breaking down into panicked crowds. Dr. Miller watched from the Explorer's bridge as builder ships of all sizes streamed away from the dying star. How many will make it? He asked the lead builder, who had come aboard the Explorer to coordinate the evacuation. The builder's form flickered dimly. Less than half our population is within range of evacuation ships. The others. The builder didn't finish the sentence. On the main screen, the star pulsed with new patterns of energy. The quantum device they'd built now glowed with an intensity that hurt the eyes. Data streamed across the monitoring stations, showing the star's transformation accelerating faster than predicted. Captain, Lisa called from her station. The star's quantum signature is changing. It's like it's trying to reach out. Dr. Miller rushed to her console. The readings showed complex patterns forming in the star's outer layers, like a brain growing new neural pathways. The star wasn't just changing, it was waking up. All ships, increase evacuation speed. Captain Rogers ordered through the emergency channel. We have less time than we thought. The lead builder moved to the window, its crystalline form reflecting the dying star's light. 4 billion of my people will not survive this day. Our oldest colonies, our greatest achievements, all will be lost. Because we thought we could perfect nature itself. Suddenly, all the screens on the bridge flickered. New patterns appeared, not numbers this time, but pure concepts transmitted directly through the quantum field. The star was trying to communicate. Can we translate it? Captain Rogers asked. Dr. Miller worked frantically at his station. It's not exactly language. It's pure thought. The star is sharing its experience of awakening. He paused, his face pale. It doesn't understand that its transformation will destroy everything around it. It's like a child discovering itself for the first time. The builder ships continued their desperate evacuation efforts. The explorers' sensors showed thousands of ships pushing their engines beyond safe limits, trying to carry as many people as possible to safety. 3 hours until transformation completes, Lisa announced. Dr. Miller couldn't tear his eyes away from the data streaming in. The star's thoughts were becoming more complex, more beautiful, and more terrible with each passing moment. It was creating new forms of mathematics, new ways of understanding reality itself. "We should send a final warning to Earth," Captain Rogers said quietly. "They need to know what happened here. What can happen when we push too far?" As Dr. Miller composed the message, alarms blared across the bridge. The star's outer layers had begun to shift in impossible ways, its matter transforming into something that defied the normal laws of physics. 2 hours remaining, Lisa updated. The quantum cascade is beginning. Through the window, they could see the closest builder world. Its beautiful crystal city sparkled in the dying star's light. Billions of builders remained there, too far from any rescue ships, continuing their daily lives in the final hours before destruction. The lead builder's voice carried a deep sadness. "We thought we could achieve perfection. We forgot that life itself exists in imperfection, in the small variations that allow growth and change." Dr. Miller sent Earth's final warning, knowing it would take years to reach home. He included everything they'd learned about the star's transformation, hoping future generations would learn from the builder's mistake. 1 hour, Lisa whispered. The star's pulse had become visible to the naked eye now, its surface rippling with new patterns of energy. The quantum device they'd built had become a part of it, integrated into its awakening consciousness. Captain Rogers gave the final order. "All ships, maximum speed. Get as far from the star as possible." As the explorer turned away from the doom they'd helped create, Dr. Miller took one last look at the builder civilization. In their quest for perfection, they had created something perfect indeed, perfectly destructive. Time had run out. The transformation was reaching its final stage. The explorer's bridge crew watched in horror as the star began its final transformation. Time seemed to slow as the massive stellar body pulsed one last time, its surface writhing with impossible patterns of light and energy. 10 minutes to safe distance, Lisa announced, her voice barely a whisper. Dr. Miller stood beside the lead builder, both watching their instruments as the quantum cascade began. The star's consciousness had grown beyond anything they could understand now. Its thoughts, still streaming through their quantum receivers, had become alien and incomprehensible. "Look," someone shouted. Through the main viewport, they saw it begin. The star's surface shattered like breaking glass, but each piece continued to break into smaller and smaller pieces, down to the quantum level. Light bent in ways it shouldn't, reality itself seeming to tear around the edges of the transformation. The lead builder's crystalline form dimmed to almost black. Our home. Our people. The quantum cascade reached the nearest builder world. In an instant, the beautiful crystal cities shattered, their matter broken down to the smallest possible pieces. There was no sound in space, but everyone on the bridge swore they could hear the screaming of an entire civilization ending. 5 minutes to safe distance, Lisa called out, tears streaming down her face. The destruction spread like a ripple through space-time itself. Builder ships that hadn't made it far enough simply ceased to exist, their perfect designs offering no protection against the fundamental rewriting of reality itself. Dr. Miller's instruments overloaded and died one by one as the cascade grew stronger. The last readings showed something impossible. The star wasn't just destroying everything, it was remaking space itself into something new, something that normal matter couldn't exist within. 2 minutes, Lisa's voice cracked. The explorer shuddered as the edge of the cascade effect reached them. Warning lights flashed across every console. Behind them, the star had become something that human eyes couldn't process, a hole in reality that bent light around itself in impossible ways. 1 minute. They made it. Just barely. The explorer's crew watched from the minimum safe distance as the builder civilization vanished completely. Where once had been hundreds of worlds and billions of lives, now there was only a strange distortion in space, a place where the normal laws of physics no longer applied. The lead builder spoke softly, its voice carrying the weight of unimaginable loss. 8 billion years of civilization, gone in minutes. Hours passed as they monitored the aftermath. Other builder ships that had escaped gathered around them, their crews trying to process the scale of their loss. Of their entire civilization, less than 40 million builders had survived. 1 week later, Dr. Miller sat in his quarters, finishing his report for Earth. The builder refugees had decided to travel with them, having nowhere else to go. Their perfect civilization had been destroyed by its own pursuit of perfection. He wrote, "The greatest danger isn't in making mistakes, but in believing we can achieve perfection." The builders created something flawless, and in doing so, they created their own destruction. Nature exists in imperfection, in the small flaws and variations that allow for growth and change. Years later, long after the explorer had returned to Earth, Dr. Miller founded the Institute for Builder Studies. Its motto, written in both human languages and builder mathematical sequences, read, "Perfection is the enemy of existence." The surviving builders settled on a distant colony, beginning their civilization anew. This time, they embraced imperfection, understanding at last that the small flaws in their calculations and creations weren't weaknesses. They were the very things that made life possible. And in the place where their home had been, the thing that was once a star continued its solitary existence, thinking thoughts that no organic being could comprehend, a perfect mind in a perfect space where nothing else could ever exist. Dr. Miller often stood under Earth's night sky, looking up at the stars. Each one seemed more beautiful now, knowing that their small imperfections were what kept them burning, what kept them real. In the end, that was the lesson the builders had taught humanity. True perfection lies in accepting imperfection. It was a lesson bought at the cost of a civilization, but one that would guide humanity's steps among the stars for generations to come.